forgot it's gonna, there we go. So I'm done. Back to you.
Okay, good. That means I have to nix something off the screen here. 1 second. Okay, now I see you again. Okay, so anyway, I'm a Californian. I grew up in Southern California in San Diego in a secular family. No real religious upbringing, but I just always had this sense something was missing, something that might be important, even though I didn't really know what it was. I began Hindu meditation in the 1960s. And as some of you who are as old as I am will know that Hindu meditation was really bigger in the early 60s, and Buddhism came to be something of a cultural force in the late 60s and into the 70s and beyond. Buddhism began to dominate in the United States and in Europe also. So I began with Hindu meditation, but began Zen meditation pretty early on. I went through many majors in college: business, economics, history, politics, but ended up a religious studies major, and then went off to graduate school to study Buddhism. I'm very interested in Buddhist meditation and the image of the Bodhisattva, and in really everything about Buddhism. I became a student of Mayazumi Roshi, who is the founder of the Zen Center of Los Angeles, and have had the opportunity to practice in Japan and in Taiwan and in Nepal and various places. Even the luxury of getting to do a sesshin at Dogen's Eiheiji in Japan, his primary temple. So I've had the good fortune of being able to travel and live in Asia. I've been writing books and articles on Zen and on Buddhist philosophy generally for many years now. And I want to thank you, and maybe you're not done yet, but congratulate you on your reading of the Six Perfections. To write something is long and difficult, like that book, is an ordeal. And to have people appreciate it and really read it and take it seriously, I can't tell you how much that means to me. It means a lot. And I know it's a struggle. I know it's a hard book to read. It's lengthy. But anyway, I greatly appreciate it, and all power to you in finishing it. Let me also add, I have a new book out called Living Skillfully, Buddhist Philosophy of Life from the Vimalakirti Sutra, a Buddhist sutra some of you may know. And I think it's more readable than the Six Perfections. I'm slowly learning how better to communicate, and I think this one does it a little better, but maybe someday you'll tell me. So the book, I wrote the book on this particular topic because besides being for many, many years fascinated with these aspects of character that are so exalted in Buddhism. But in order to be able to align my academic work with my own inner meditative work, so that the paramitas are called bases of training. They are what you, as a Buddhist, might base your training on. There are other ways to go about it, but this is one really central and important sort of foundation for training in Buddhism. And so I thought, okay, let me write on that as I, in my own life, try to cultivate those characteristics of generosity and morality and tolerance and energy and meditation and wisdom, as I try to come to embody those in whatever failed and weak way I can. So it's the good fortune of having a profession that allowed me to do that, where I can combine the two, my work and my spiritual work. So the paramitas, they're called perfections often, sometimes called the transcendences, where it's meant transcendent. How do you go beyond? How do you transcend your current state? How do you go beyond the current state of our culture? How do you make things better? How do you improve and deepen your grasp of reality and your compassionate relationship to it? And so in that sense, they're bases for training. And although meditation is one of the six, right, number 5, at the next highest level, it's really involved in all of the other 5. That what you're doing when you're cultivating generosity is you're engaged in meditation, right? You're engaged in an effort to train yourself to be able to be generous. You know, one of the most difficult things there is, because we until we train ourselves, until we make some progress in that respect, we tend to focus mostly on ourselves, and we tend to focus on what's good for us. And in fact, when we begin to study as Buddhists, typically we do that for self-centered reasons, right? We think it'll be good for us, and that's why I began. And it is good for us, but the good that it brings to us is that it loosens that sense of self-absorption, right? Over time, you're enabled, you're empowered to think a little less about yourself and a little more about others, until as you become a real bodhisattva, your sense of community is central, and your outreach to others is profound, and you're really able to let go of the sort of greed and animosity and delusions, the 3 poisons, if you recognize those, and let go of those to a greater and greater extent, and reach out to others, and reach out to all of reality, right? To be able to see reality out beyond your delusions about it. So why do we meditate? Well, that's an important question. If you're meditating, you should be asking yourself that all the time, and you should be cultivating your reasons. And as you meditate, the hope is that your reasons will become deeper and deeper. Your reasons will become more profound and less self-absorbed. So we meditate in order to cultivate calming, composure, right? Focus, concentration, in order to be a meditative person, a thoughtful, contemplative kind of person, somebody who is calm, alert, thoughtful, imaginative. Many traits come to us through meditation, but the beneficiary of those growing traits is not just you, it's not just me, it's everyone around us, right? So the extent to which I can really calm myself and come to have an undistorted relationship to the world around me, to the extent I can do that, others around me benefit, right? And eventually, if I become a real bodhisattva, that's the point. It's not about me, it's about my ability to join others in a community of an undistorted relationship to the world around us, and to really see things as they are. So basically, I started out with this book in order to increasingly attempt, at least, to embody these 6 qualities of character. And also, as I was studying them in the tradition of Buddhism, and there are many other qualities of character that the Buddhists talk about as well, right? Truthfulness and honesty, and you can name many others, courage. I began to see more and more that all of those are included, they're encompassed by these 6, so that these 6 really are huge, important categories. So for the quality and authenticity of a human life, having these characteristics available as your sort of default self, right? As the way you go about dealing with others, that ends up being the most serious spiritual dimension of meditation and cultivation. So I want to not talk too long, and since you've been reading this book, let you ask questions, but let me just talk about a couple of the paramitas, just a little bit. I understand you've just gotten through the fourth chapter, right? Which fourth perfection is tolerance or patience, imperturbability, the ability to stay focused, not be hurt by what somebody says, the ability to tolerate some degree of pain, the ability to tolerate many things ends up being really important in life, as you'll see. We all know the difference between somebody who's just always injured by everything, right? Anybody says anything that could be interpreted as a slight, oh, it hurts so badly, and they're out of control for a couple of days, it just injures them. Or somebody for whom a stubbed toe is like the end of the world, as it was for us when we were 4-year-olds charging through the world. We grow the ability to understand pain and to tolerate some degree of suffering. And bodhisattvas in the Mahayana tradition cultivate that capacity because life does entail a great deal of suffering, right? We just, no matter how lucky we are, no matter how fortunate, no matter how good we are at dodging bullets and errors and so on, we're going to suffer. And things will, the ups and downs in life come to everyone no matter what. So the capacity to take that in and not be thrown off course, right? To stay the course, to stay centered, stay calm, realize I can do this, I can handle this, and I can, furthermore, I can go on with what I take to be my true task, right? Whatever I'm doing that's really important. So another aspect of, it's pronounced kshanti, the Sanskrit word tolerance or patience, is the ability to tolerate the truth. And we all think, well, what do you mean tolerate the truth? We all think, of course we tolerate the truth. Truth is the truth. But in fact, we avoid it whenever it hurts, right? We rationalize, we make excuses. We tell the story always from our point of view and not necessarily taking others' perspectives into consideration. When the truth is broader than just how we see it, the truth is the big picture of everyone's perspective. And the truth is also a depth dimension, seeing through a shallow take on things. So tolerating the truth is to be able to take in reality, even when it hurts to do that, right? Even when you'd rather not, even when the truth I have to take in is my own failure, my own weakness. But until you can face that and say, okay, I failed, or this really is a weakness, I can't do anything about it, right? It's just the way things are, until I can admit it and then begin to work on it. So, and everything can be worked on, right? Everything has a way where it can be transformed, right? It can be, you can engage in some transcendence, the 6 paramitas being transcendences. So one way we do that, in talking about tolerance, is we can premeditate situations in which difficulties may arise. And we can do this by going back in our life. When did I really screw up, right? When did I handle the situation so badly that it hurt me, it hurt others, it hurt everyone around me? And if I can tolerate that fact and deal with it and face it and say to myself, okay, what can I do about that? How can I deepen myself so that the next time something like that comes up, I don't do that, right? I practice something much more open to others, much wiser, much more compassionate. So we can also make up situations, right? I can say, well, what happens if I get in a car accident and it's my fault, right? So typically I'm going to get out and I'm going to rationalize, well, you did this and you did that. But premeditate that situation. If that comes up, what would be best to do, right? First, calm the other person, assure the other person that everything will be okay. You know, you don't know who this person is. Go easy on the person and be able to work with them, learn who they are. Okay, and what if it's their fault? You come out angry, you come out incensed? No. Best to come out, again, in the mode of understanding. How can you really be an understanding, calm, compassionate person and help the situation through? So by premeditation, I mean just thinking out things that might happen and you meditate on them, right? Work them through, right? So that some chance when the situation comes up, your default move, where I might have gotten angry at this person or the situation, now, if I've really worked on that hard enough, I can maybe be different, maybe just a little bit different, maybe a lot different, and it may make a huge difference in the outcome of the situation. Okay, so impatience is something, let me be frank, I struggle with. I think we all do to some extent, but impatience is arrogance. It's presumptuous, right? I have a son who's blind and who's texting me right now, sorry. And, you know, so he does everything differently than the way I do them, and he's slower, and I tend to move through the world really quickly, and I'm always having to wait, and yes, and it took me, and I still haven't got it, but it took me a long time to learn to accommodate his mode, right? So I've got to scale back and get into his mode and help him along. My impatience does nothing but make him slower and more awkward. And so that lesson has been really important for me, even though I'm still a little bit, more than a little bit impatient. Toleration of uncertainty and risk in life. Life is risky. We never know what's coming, right? How do you tolerate that, right? Do you enclose your world to cut off all risks? Do you convince yourself dogmatically that you're certain about how things are? All those are, from a Buddhist perspective, deeply mistaken, right? You have to learn to tolerate the fact that we don't know what's about to happen. We don't know what's coming. And there's risk entailed. Even if I deal with this person in a traffic accident in a beautifully understanding way, it's possible that that's not going to work, right? So there's always risk. Let's see how we're doing time-wise. Let me talk maybe just a little bit about generosity. Let me pose this as a question. I puzzled over this initially, for you to think about. Why is generosity first, right? And morality or justice second? Doesn't it make more sense to have the first one? And these are sequential to some extent. Wisdom's the highest level. You're doing them all at the same time, but there is a sequence. Why would morality not be the first one? Because basically, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Until you can do that, I mean, how are you possibly going to be generous? How are you going to be anything? So bottom line seems to be morality, but they put generosity first. So why? And I puzzled over that for a while. And then I realized that generosity is one of the great pleasures in life. Think back in your life where you did something really generous, right? Even not necessarily giving something, but giving a really warm welcome to somebody who just needed it, or any gesture of generosity or openness, and how good it feels when you realize that somebody takes that in and really, really need it. That's just one of the great joys that we have. It's a huge pleasure. So the 6 perfections start off with something that is really fun, frankly. Although it's painful to overcome our greed and give things away, once we're able to do that, there's a great pleasure in that. And we're all taught to, more or less by our parents, to be able to give and not to be selfish. And we learn the pleasure in that as time goes on. So generosity is this wonderful joy that we have in life. And to start off with something really fun makes sense. Morality stuff, right? Morality requires you really ask yourself, what would justice be in this situation? What would justice be in our culture, in our society? How could I, as a human being, treat others in my family with serious justice and deep morality and attention to their well-being? We recognize, and I think that we could safe to say this is true of everybody who's tuned in right now, or you wouldn't be tuned in right now, that all of us have been given a great deal in our life. Huge acts of generosity have come to us. Our parents, even bad parents, make unbelievable sacrifices on behalf of their kids, right, to raise them. But beyond that, our teachers were generous with us. They helped us, our neighbors, our friends. But beyond that, farmers, grocers, road pavers, technicians, everybody has been giving us something. That we're living the life we live only because thousands of people have been making donations to us, not just to us, but to everybody. And we realize, if we contemplate it, and we do under the perfection of generosity, just how intertwined we all are, and how all of us giving to each other in profound ways is really important. And we also see, all of us recognize this, no matter how enlightened or unenlightened, that people are more or less generous, right? There are people who are not Buddhists, but are not Christians, not anything, just kind of, they're raised to be generous, or they're naturally generous. Somehow they're generous, and we know the difference, and we see that. And when we see a really generous person, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Somebody who would undergo that sacrifice for me. This person doesn't even know me, or does, but it's startling. But the meditations here are to contemplate everything that's been given to us, to allow us to be who we are, to allow us to have the life we currently have. And now, given gratitude for that, given how thankful we could become if we contemplate all we've been given, how we could perfect our own generosity. There's a lot in Buddhist sutras about generosity, and the Buddha is pictured in many of the sutras as generous above all else. Like it's the one thing you can count on the Buddha to be. Right? He doesn't have things to give. He doesn't own anything, but his generosity just surges forth. It just comes out of him, and he gives up the pleasures of his own contemplative, meditative life in order to be there for everyone. And he's got crowds of people around him. Some of them rude, and some of them whatever, but they're there to get something from this guy, and he's ready to give. So there is a deep relationship between generosity and the extent to which we've become unselfish, right? We know that. But this is the Buddhist concept of no self, right? That what you cultivate in the perfections is a slow end to self-absorption, right? Just being caught up in yourself. And so that's what no self means. It's not just that there is no self, permanent, fixed, static self. It's that ethically, as we mature, as we become bodhisattvas in a real sense, we're able to deal with the world in a way that recognizes the whole of reality and not just ourself, right? Which is, our typical mode. And it's our task as bodhisattvas to grow out of that, to mature to the point where we're able to give selflessly wherever the need is. Okay, there's a tradition in early Buddhism called mudita in the Sanskrit, and it is a practice of sympathetic joy. Many of you have probably heard that. It's translated differently, but what it means is that somebody else has good fortune, right? Somebody else just does something amazing, passes a test, creates something great, and they're really happy because they did this, and you didn't do it. And rather than be, jealous of that, you participate in that joy. Sympathetic, meaning you take the emotion from this person, and you experience that joy too, along with the person who has every reason to be joyful. And a bodhisattva will do that because every accomplishment, every achievement is really the achievement of a whole community, right? A whole culture. We all had a hand in it. Nobody's an island. Nobody's separate altogether. Although this person is the one who really brought it to fruition, the whole community around her or him is what made that possible for her to do that, right? That realization helps us to appreciate generosity, to be deeply grateful, and to begin to practice generosity in our own lives. Okay, I think I want to stop there and let all of you think about any questions you might have from your reading or from anything I've said, or, I'm a professor of Buddhist studies. You have questions about Buddhism? We could do that too. So please pose some questions. Well, let me let you join in this.
Nice. Again, Dale, thank you so much for your commentary. And again, as you so pointed out, we've been studying these. For every month we've been talking about a different paramita, but then also how that relates to our day-to-day practice. Two things that you said. First of all, scholars often are not Buddhists. I heard you in your history talk about, well, you practice Buddhism. If you could give us a couple of comments about, as you approached your scholarship, how being a practicing Buddhist or a person that practiced Buddhism, how that experience was for you, because we've had a lot of scholars here that weren't Buddhists that studied Buddhism. So that's always an interesting take. And then the other piece of that, I'm just throwing this out, folks, just to get us started. You were talking about the paramitas, and I thought it was interesting that in each of those, it seemed to be like two ends of the spectrum. Like, let's look at what the lack version of this paramita is versus what's the extremes, and how we can see in each paramita some of the both, and then what that reflects back to our own individual practice. So that's something to work with too. So just two things to get us kicked off, and then as always, folks, as you have questions, please come off of mute. You raise your hand, turn on your camera or not. Just throw stuff out there as always. So this is just to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Kusatsu. Okay, great questions. On the first one, yeah, I wouldn't have become a scholar if it just meant being academic and scholarly. And I called myself an impatient person, and to some extent, that affects my scholarship, and that I don't care whether Dogen went to China in this year or that year or that year. I care just what the best Dogen teachings are. And I care because they're going to be transformative for me in my own life. And I care because they can be transformative for my students as I teach them. So it means I'm, in some sense, a lesser scholar. That scholars debate all kinds of things, and they find it interesting, and I just don't. So for me, there is the philosophical word is existential. I have an existential interest, meaning it affects the existence that we have. That's what I care about. And so when I do my work, when I do my writing, I'm focused there as much as possible, filling in the blanks and the side spaces. So that was that possibility that I could do that. And I had a teacher in college who did that beautifully. I said, okay, if I could do that, I'll be a professor. That's great. And I could do that, and it worked beautifully for me. For my students, it meant that I could do a brief meditation before going into class and focus on, okay, here are these 18, 19, 20-year-olds, okay? Who are they, right? What do they need? I'm a 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60, 70. How do I communicate with them? And what do they need, right? What are the tools of life that at that stage would really be important? So I'm teaching Buddhism, I'm teaching all kinds of other things, but I'm trying to teach it in a way that would be focused really on their needs, right? What would be most enlightening for them at this point in their lives? And so being a Buddhist helped me recognize all of those dimensions of the task as a teacher that are really important. So let me also mention that no matter what any of you do occupationally, your Buddhist practice should be woven into that work. I mean, not as an evangelist. You're not trying to convert anybody, but into your character, right? How can you, when you're going to work, how can your practice, what did your practice of reciting these vows, the Bodhisattva vows, how can those be translated into real life acts at work today? Right? What kinds of things might I do today that would be slightly different, that would be slightly more open, would be slightly more alert and attentive to what the situation requires and what people need in this situation. So we can all do this. And that's the point of Buddhist practice. The point of Buddhist practice is to transform the community through oneself. You always have to start with yourself. You can't start elsewhere. You're not ready for that. But how can you bring those ideals to bear on what you're doing in real life? That's important. Okay. Second topic had to do with what the extremes of selfishness and unselfishness, or generosity and greediness. Is that it? Is that it?
It's just the extremes of all the paramitas, essentially. It's something to work with in our own practice.
Yeah. Well, one thing to do is to begin to think about these, contemplate, meditate on these, not just in general, like what is generosity in general, but what is my level of generosity? Where do I come out here, right? Morality, tolerance or patience, energy or effort, right? Where do I stand, right? So that you know what you can work on in your own transformative practice, right? In your cultivation of character. Knowing where you are between these extremes is important. So that's self-knowledge. You can think about the importance of self-knowledge. You have to understand who you are, and not be deluded, not rationalized. Okay, self-knowledge, self-rule. Okay? You have to be able, when you say, I'm going to meditate for a half hour every day, then self-rule means, okay, you're going to do that. You're not just saying that. It's not going to be, well, I'll do it maybe once this week. It means you're doing it. So self-rule means whatever you decide you're going to do in life, you do it. And where do you come out on that scale? Self-knowledge, self-rule, self-change. right? What is your capacity to change how you behave and how you think, right? So that we realize we have weaknesses. We realize that we hurt people in our families and in our environments. How can we change that? What could be done about that? So all of these have strengths and weaknesses, right? There's a place on the scale that's pretty weak, and you get up to your pretty serious bodhisattva. And these are degrees of depth of characters, right? And they're degrees of a spiritual quality in life. Okay, great questions. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Let me go to the gallery view for folks so we can just see. Again, I've sent the mic around in here, but please, in the ethers of the internet, please, if you have questions, just come off of mute. Turn on your camera if you want or not. So again, this is an opportunity for us to have the productive conversation. Did you have any comments or commentary?
Something occurred to me. I think you're younger than I am. And it might be interesting to talk about how you see the paramitas and their practice changing with age.
Oh, gosh, that's good. Yeah. Well, the one thing that's inevitable is that we don't really practice these until we reach a certain level of maturity, right? So where practice means an explicit acknowledgement that, okay, I'm working on this. That, I don't know how early in life I was able to get that, but that's the most important thing. That's called in early Buddhism, bodhicitta, the thought of enlightenment, or the realization that there is an awakened state, right? There is an awakened state of generosity. There is awakened tolerance. There is, and we don't always recognize that early in life. And so to get that, that starting point is important. And it could come anywhere in life, right? Unlikely that it's going to come very early. As a teenager, our minds are just everywhere. But, I know a few individuals who were pretty extraordinary in that regard. And then they mature over time, hopefully. But we all know that it's very common for people who are not practitioners. That is, I don't mean just practicing Buddhism. I mean practicing wisdom and practicing life, where you realize that there are things to work on. That some people do practice for a while in their life, and then they just sort of turn it off and they coast out for the rest of their lives. And we know lots of elders, all of us know them, who are just coasting through, right? They've just given up. And but we also know some elders who are just, startlingly with it and really able to grasp towards the end of their life what the situation is. And there are meditations on death, as you know, that allow us to realize that life is fleeting and life can go at any time, and there's no time to waste. And as you get older, as we all get older, we realize that more and more. This European philosopher has a concept called being unto death, so that you relate to your death and get that perspective. So if you recognize that you're going to die, which we don't as teenagers really, and as we grow older, it dawns on us, although some people just escape it. But the recognition that death is coming is a recognition that tells you, okay, this is important. Let's do something. Let me get my energy up. Let me turn on my effort to do something in life. It's your one chance, right? Here it is. Good question. I don't know what else to do with that one, but
Thank
you've
you.
given me
Good
something-
answer.
You've
Good
given
answer.
me something to contemplate.
Yeah. And I saw Joseph come onto camera. Joseph, does that usually means you want to say something?
Steve has had his hand up. I feel like he
Okay.
deserves a shot
Yeah,
first.
go ahead, Steve. I didn't see the hand. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Is that there's another side of Buddhism where we're all saying no after you, no after you, no after you. So we never get the questions. Thank you, Dr. Wright. When not knowing the schedule for this meeting, I immediately thought of when we hear the Dharma, one of the invocations is that we don't encounter the Dharma, but once in oodles of kalpas. And I've read your books, never thinking that I would have the opportunity to meet you in what now passes for meeting somebody in person. So thank you for all of your writing and thank you for your teaching. I studied with Aitken Roshi in Hawaii, and he has a book with a similar title, and that was the oh, now I can't think of it because my mind is going, because I'm getting up towards your age.
Yeah.
The practice.
And I know the book though. Yeah.
Yes, it's the practice of perfection.
There you
And
go.
I know that the reaction of many people was, well, what's the practice of perfection? And it seems to imply that I've already achieved perfection, and now I'm sort of polishing it. And with the paramitas, I know that has been, it was sort of a breakthrough for me that perfection is both a verb and a noun, being an academic, and that perfection is taking the piece of clay and polishing it until you get a mirror, and then it's perfection. And then that led into, and all of these things were just, it was wonderful what you said, and this led into premeditation and thinking that I don't think I've ever heard anybody say premeditation before, except in something like premeditated murder.
Right.
And it doesn't come up. And so at the premeditation, I was thinking about that, and your examples of what would I do under the following circumstances. And I think that my reaction, and it is of course a reaction, was that I'm not necessarily sure that I would want to do that I would want to rely on my response in the moment. And that one of the old, we're approximately the same age, so back in the 60s in the Cold War, one of the questions on the playground was, what if, you play what if, and one of the big ones was, what if the communists came and made you say you didn't believe in God? What would you do under those circumstances? And what would I do if I ran over somebody? And Aitken Roshi used to phrase it as, well, the injunction was every day is a good day. And what about the day that you run over a child? There was a koan of sorts. Do we want to anticipate? Do we want to premeditate on, well, this is what I would do under these circumstances. This is what I would do if this happened. To what extent can we rely on our understanding, on our practice to tell us what to do as circumstances arise?
Okay, terrific question. and that koan is about as powerful as any I can imagine.
Mhm.
You know, running over a child. Is that a good day? Yeah. Here's what I think about this. And I appreciate you recognize that the only place we use the word premeditation is in relationship to murder. I thought, is there a positive twist on that word? And in some sense, the word pre there is unnecessary because if you meditate, you're already in advance of the situation. But I just like the ring of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it a good thing? I think so, because your action will always be spontaneous. You know, you will do what you're going to do in those situations, period. But can you transform in advance through self-cultivation what your possible moves are? You know, if my only move is I'm going to get angry at some situation, can I change myself at all and cultivate at least other possible moves? Maybe I will get angry, maybe I get less angry, but can I drill into myself a second nature? If my nature is just get angry and I'm pissed off, is there a second nature that I would prefer? What would I prefer to respond? Now, you can't count on yourself to do that, but you can count on yourself not to do anything good if your default move is always this really negative reaction, right? So that working on another possibility at least makes it possible. And to the extent that you really deepen that into yourself through meditation, premeditation, then maybe something else would be possible. I want to refer to your first comment, was really wonderful too, about the word perfection and so on. And I'm not sure, when you do the 4 bodhisattva vows, do you say delusions are inexhaustible? Is that the phrasing you use?
Yep.
In at least one of the places I practiced, that was where it was.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a series of statements as to what is so.
Yeah. So that's really brilliant. Delusions are inexhaustible, right? Even the Buddha has some delusions. In other words, it's bottomless. There's no end to any of this. So we say delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to see through them. I vow to put an end to them. But that's just, I'm committed to doing this, even though I recognize fully well that that's not possible. I'm doing it anyway. That's the brilliant, almost absurdity written into the Bodhisattva vow. You're vowing to do something you can't do and you know it. But if that's what you're vowing to do, then everything goes into doing what you can to move in that direction. Okay, anyway, thank you, great. And Joseph, you're up.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure I have a ton to add, but I guess the thing that occurred to me, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has an article on Zen, and its first sentence says something like Zen aims at the perfection of the human being. And so I guess I don't know if I wanted to try to pose a question about sort of Zen and this idea of perfection as a process. I feel like this is what Fusatsu was getting at with the kind of middle way thinking, where in fact and I feel like you were sort of like the structure of your talk suggests, like each of the paramitas is kind of like, it is a gate. It can be an object of contemplation, but that can move us towards seeing it as this living principle that lets us not get caught up in its formal description, but just immediately clearly being radiating. You sort of hinted at Buddha's emanation of the perfections as part of his, a lucid appeal to others. But he would back that up with very careful.
Yeah.
And I guess like one of the things I feel like the Buddha is always saying is like, don't get caught up in the past or the future because the present is immediately clear. And this, I feel like you were saying this also, you're saying like you could die tomorrow, live in the moment. So like, please don't get attached. But I don't know, I wonder if you could reflect on, I guess, on that, about like, at least in Zen, where, it's very, the present experience is, like one of the things we're, not thinking about when we're meditating, and like how to get more in touch with present reality, not to abandon, causes and conditions and real memories and situations. But I don't know. You asked like, why do we meditate? And it's, you said to perfect your default self. And that's, I feel like a perfected default self is one that's not getting caught up in historical or future, anticipation. Anyway, sorry, don't let me get caught in a circle about this. Hopefully you got the sense of my question, maybe.
Definitely. Yeah. So you started out by saying that the first line in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on Zen is the aim of Zen is perfection. And that's interesting, misleading maybe in some respects, but not, because what you aim at, you can't be grasping way ahead of yourself in the future, delusions about anything, because the real aim of anything is, what am I doing right now? What am I doing today? Right? That's the important move. And we know that's nowhere near perfection, right? No matter what we do, even if we do it really, really well, we're not perfect, and we never will be. So although that's the direction of our aim, that direction is vague, and we're always changing our understanding of what that means and which way to go to get there. And so the present focus that you dwell on, that Buddhists dwell on, is really important. It's not that you should obliterate the future and the past, right? Contemplating the past is really important. Learn from your mistakes. Learn what your family heritage really is, right? What did your family do for you and to you? Understand that. That's important. Future, you have to think about where you're headed in the future and where you want our culture and our community to go in the future. But achieving anything requires really strong focus on the present, right? What am I doing right now, and how can I do this really well? But then every once in a while you have to stand back from the present and say, okay, what's my direction? What's my aim? Where am I going? And how does my past make that possible for me? And then you say, okay, that's my direction. I got it. Back into the present, and you're off and working again. So those are really important reflections. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Any other comments on that, Joseph? Are you good?
No, yes, sorry. Yes, I know I'm good. Please, yeah, if there's more stuff from the Zendo or anyone else. No, thank you, Dale. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I did have a brief comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I come from a background of design, creativity, art, music, jazz, that kind of thing. And a lot of us do. We have a lot of creative people in our community. And we look at premeditation as being, or we look at Zazen as like the heart of creativity, because you're immersing yourself in your most familiar medium, which is your own consciousness. And given time, sitting still enough, long enough, it begins to change. And so making the familiar strange is one way of expressing creativity. And maybe you could speak about that a little bit. In the arts, performing arts, it's very common to mentally rehearse, what you're going to go out on stage and do, so that you anticipate. And we recommend that people sit with a notepad next to them when they sit, as a lot of teachers do, especially students and people who are engaged in creative activities, so that when you have a clarity from Zazen, or even, and there's a book called Higher Creativity, Breakthrough Insights in Exploring the Hypnagogic, Hypnopompic States and Sleeping, Half Awake, Half Asleep.
Mhm.
Something similar happens in Samadhi, I think, where your mind becomes very uninhibited, freed up. My teacher called it imagination thinking. About 270 degrees around the full circle, where hairs on a tortoise, horns on a rabbit become possible. These are metaphors Buddha used. So the idea of premeditation, I think, is one baked in. We didn't term it that. I think it's a stroke of insight to call it that, premeditation. And maybe you could speak about that in terms of just simple problem solving. In other words, you jot things down while you're sitting, you can get back to them later. And you may have an aha or eureka moment while you're in Zazen, and then sit there and ruminate and worry about forgetting this brilliant idea you have. So we say, just jot it down, get back to it. That kind of practicality is what we kind of emphasize.
That's excellent. Yeah. And it's very important. And to recognize Zazen as the ground of the capacity for creativity and for doing things that you're not going to be capable without having developed certain mental powers. And music and the arts are really important areas there. So is athletics. Athletes train and train and train and train, but when it comes time for the game or whatever it is, all that has to be in the background. Right? You drop all of that, and you can't be thinking if you're up to bat or you're backing up to throw a pass. Better not be thinking about anything. You have to now go deep into instincts, as a jazz musician improvising would. But the ground has been built, right? The foundation is there through prior training. So I love the idea about jotting down ideas that come to you so that you can then put it aside, then now get back to the meditation. Otherwise, you're trying to, I can't forget that, I can't forget that. You need to let that go and deal with it later, right? But if you got it down, you can let it go. There's a whole lot of interesting things to think about in this domain of the interface between meditation and creativity. Let me tell you a quick story. This is a Russian short story, and it is about a contest between singers in a country pub. And Yashka, the local, everybody knows this is an area in Russia where everybody sings. Singing is the one skill that everyone has to some extent, but everybody knows who's best, right? Who's really got it, got that voice, got the ability to do it. And Yashka is the one in this village, but there's somebody who's the contractor, who's actually a contractor, builder from the larger city farther away, who has a huge reputation from counties of being an absolutely astonishing singer. The contractor's coming to the village pub, and there's going to be a singing contest. And contractor goes first, and he's of course brilliant, and everything's perfect. Can go to high notes and twill and do all kinds of things, dancing through the song. And people in the pub are getting up in the beginning to dance. It's quite wonderful, and everybody's really happy. And when he's done, everybody says, no, Yashka can't possibly compete with that, right? That's just too perfect, right? It's just at every note, exactly right. Deep, high, low, all over the place. So Yashka then starts, and at first he's halting and awkward because he's nervous, he's caught in himself, right? He's self-conscious. But then he closes his eyes and the audience disappear and it's stone silent. And the song takes him over and he's possessed by the song. And it's a song of great sadness and deep, deep melancholy. And he's singing, and he's possessed by the sadness, and tears are coming out of his eyes, and he's wailing through this deep ode to pain and suffering. And everybody's transfixed, and jaws are dropping. People are just astonished because Yashka, the local, has been possessed, right? This isn't practiced. He couldn't do this in 100 tries unless he's been taken over by some force outside of himself, some force beyond himself, in this case, the music and the song and the suffering that everybody goes through. He's able spontaneously to just completely overwhelm the brilliant technicality of the other singer. And when it's over, the contractor says, "Phew, I give up." And I never heard anything like that. That was just unbelievable. Nobody can speak. The people sobbing in the background. So the song took over the pub. And so it's a song about the limitations of technique and the limitations of training. Training's absolutely important. But beyond that, to really delve into something that could be called greatness, human excellence, or just excellence beyond the human, is to let yourself go into larger forces. And the greatest jazz musicians, the greatest musicians can do that. Yeah, there's also stories about samurai in Japan about how they have to get into the Zen state of mind. But these samurais know full well that if all you've got is a Zen state of mind and no training with the sword, you're dead, right? You need to do the full training with the sword and have the Zen state of no self and fearlessness, fearless of death, in order to be able to do it at the highest level. So two sides that are essential.
Thank you for that. Wonderful.
Angan Sensei? Did you have anything, Angan? Sorry.
No, thank you. Other than thank you very much, Dr. Wright. Really enjoyed seeing you. Welcome. Hope you come back sometime.
I'll be happy to. Thank you very much.
All right. Let's do last call for questions. Anyone in the Zendo? Any additional questions, comments? Okay. And again, last call for anyone online. Any questions or I think, is that Steve waving the hand, or is you? I think he's talking to somebody else. All right. Dr. Adele, right? Do you have a question, Steve?
Yeah, yes. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
You're on.
Okay. I keep promising myself that I'm not going to ask more than one question at these things, but the opportunity
You're blowing it.
with the Zendo is so wonderful. I did have the very prosaic question that I think was asked first, that there is a huge community of Buddhist scholars, and like I'm writing a paper on bee biology where I'm going to wrangle with somebody as to which of these two subspecies of honeybees is most closely related. And there will be about 3 people in the world who really care.
Yeah.
That and I believe it was actually in book form, but I guess there is a controversy at the moment in the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra that someone has provided some sort of textual analysis that suggests that the last invocation of the Gate is a later add-on to the first part, and that so this is a scholarly controversy. And I found myself, I think, and I see you nodding and smiling, that must be wonderful and relaxing to be able to go back and look at all the documents on that. my question is, of the people that are Buddhist scholars, approximately what fraction is it? Is it a majority or is it a minority? Are people that are Buddhist scholars without being Buddhist practitioners?
Yeah, that's a hard one because most scholars don't disclose what their religious affiliation is. But some Buddhist scholars don't mind at all having it be known. And you can't tell really from people's writing always. Some people you can tell, but you can't tell whether they're Buddhist or not. So what would I guess? I would say in the early days of Buddhist studies, most were in some way practitioners to some extent. Today, I would say less, and maybe half, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, but again, it's really hard to tell. Just as in the zoological world, you have no idea what people's politics are or what their religious affiliation is.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, it doesn't. It's not. It's ordinarily not relevant to what they do. Whereas I might have thought that anybody that is engaged in religious studies generally would have an opinion. And that immediately makes me think of the kinds of classes that you do. Bart Ehrman, who is a well-known teacher of Christianity, and sort of got on the slippery slope and left that, and remarks that the large majority of students that come into his classes are Christian students who are seeking to enhance their knowledge of the New Testament as the word of Christ. And I can imagine a Buddhist class where students are showing up to inform curiosity rather than because they want to, they see that as a vehicle to take up Zazen or anything.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so proselytizing is something that's needs to be avoided. But you might find this interesting just quickly. I know we're running out of time, but to the prestige of science in the whole academic world and in the society in general has meant that even religious studies inches year after year after year closer to science because more and more of social science. And and to that extent, that's reason why, I mean, if you want to get grants, if you want the money to do Buddhist studies, you've got to be as scientific as you can be. And you know, so that's the world we live in. And as you can tell, I sort of resisted that. I was old, somebody who's really engaged, but trying to be fair and trying to be honest and trying to be straightforward about what I'm doing. Anyway, academics is a weird world, as you clearly know.
Yes.
Do you know the book? Do you know the book, The Beekeeper?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's a Ukrainian novel that is quite incredible.
The wonderful thing about the bee paper is that I know absolutely nothing about bees, but it's possible to look at literally nothing about bees, but it's a meta-analysis and finding out all the people that thought they knew about it also don't know about it. So it's easy to write that. Wow. And I did, speaking to Sensei, I did want to put in a bid for the idea that we also rely on aha moments, and that contemplating some data,
breakthroughs
situation, that we do look at the aha, and I think that actually in many cases predisposes towards Buddhism, is that we're familiar with those moments.
Okay, thank you for taking this on. A good way to end. Thank you so much.
Yep, and Chris? Crispy, I saw you came off. Did you have any questions? Last questions?
Oh, actually, thank you. I just came across where a video where Alan Watts was quoted as saying that Buddhism is really not a religion. And it really got me thinking about that. I guess the reasoning behind it is that, and I haven't had a chance to pursue it. I just coincidentally came across it yesterday, so it's pretty interesting talking about this. Is that an interesting question? I guess is what I'm thinking right now. So
I refer to that as the Watts curse.
Well, many others have posed that question, and Buddhism was advertised early on as not religion. As we move more and more into secular age, religions were bad, and Buddhism could escape being bad by being not a religion. But it really comes down to how are you defining religion? If religion is belief in God and so on and so forth, then okay, Buddhism starts out as a non-theistic religion, right? So in that case, Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism has nothing to do with belief in God initially. There were Buddhists later for whom belief in the Buddha became important. But it's most important to think of Buddhism as a transformative practice and to not get too proud of it not being a religion or it being a religion. Kind of let that go. And I'm happy for it to be a religion, just a really enlightened religion. It can be interesting to ponder, but it really depends on what you think religion is in the first place. And so that's the place to start.
The kind of main problem there was branding it as a kind of psychotherapy. When people didn't know much about Soto Zen, Renzai was prevalent here, thanks to Daisetsu Suzuki, but it led to, I think, kind of an unhappy marriage of psychology and Zen.
That's right. Yeah. And in some cases happy, but in others distorting what Zen is about. And I think that's probably your point. But you wouldn't believe, well, you would believe how much psychologists have learned from Zen in particular, but from Buddhism. It has transformed psycho practice. So, and it's been good. And it's even in some cases given some vocabulary to Buddhists to ruminate on. But again, the focus is on, and Buddhism has to be on, practice of life, right? Focus on who you are, where you are, what's going on. So my latest book is called Living Skillfully. And it's basically my effort to use one sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, to hone in on ways that we can engage in skillful, practical life in the world.
Wonderful.
Hey, Chris, any other questions? Or are you good?
I'm good. I thank you very much. What led me there was contemplating this difference between religion and practice. I'm very young with studying Buddhism, even though I'm 74 years old. So, and coming to that realization of the distinction between practice and religion has really been enlightening for me, so to speak. So, thank you.
Yeah. Although I'm going to throw in one word on that, and a couple of words. That the practice of any religion can be anywhere from perverse all the way up to truly enlightening. I mean, there are practicing Jews and Muslims and Christians and Hindus who are engaged in a practice that is deeply transformative in a spiritual sense. And but the key there is practice, and that's what makes the difference, right? Rather than holding on to something and being dogmatic and adhering to something where you're not really practicing, you're not really doing it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to me to hear that the Dalai Lama talked about other religions and encouraged people to practice their religion faithfully,
Whatever their religion, yeah.
whatever their religion is, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Do it in depth. Whatever you're doing, do it deeply. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris. All right. Again, Dr. Wright, thank you so much for your time, your energy, again, and your constant study of how to be able to communicate with us as, in the form of your writing. We have found it of value. So again, if you are continuing to write even into your retirement, that would be very helpful. So, and you're still in your willingness to continue to speak about what you're learning and sharing that. So we are so grateful to just have had you come and speak about this book as well as a study of talking and listening to how the practice and your evolution of your practice through your writing. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, all of you. I enjoyed it. It's a pleasure. Again, someday.
Yes, someday. Much success to you in your future endeavors. And is your book already out?
It's out.
All right, nice.
Yep.
So check it out if you haven't already done that. So a couple quick announcements before we close. Again, we have a retreat coming up with STO. We also have the, I think, watershed for people that are already registered for that. That is actually now closed out. So participate where you can. There's always daily AM and PM practice opportunities. So again, as we were talking about today, it's all about really practicing. So there are plenty of opportunities to practice every single week. So check that out on the website. If you are not already, again, let me just first say thank you to folks that are consistent contributors to our Sangha. That is needed to maintain the venue and also for our teachers and teaching. So thank you for that. But if you're not, and you find value in what we do, please consider contributing where you find value. Value given, value received. Without further ado, again, thank you so much, Dr. Wright, again. And then we hope to see you back, maybe a discussion about the next book. So who knows what's coming in the future. And we'll allow Hojo to ring us out for our closing verse.
Please join in the four great vows. We repeat them 3 times, maybe a slightly different translation than you're accustomed to. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Be numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha way possible, I vow to realize it. Being numberless, vow to free them. Delusions inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates boundless, vow to enter them. Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it.